May lightning come down from the heavens and smite me if I ever say the words probability of success with a client or prospect.
Dun, dun, dun. You know, super excited to be here today with another amazing episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. And of course with my host, the legendary Matthew Jarvis. Jarvis, how you doing, bud?
Micah, good to be here. We're actually in Alaska together right now. So if you're listening to this in your car, when you get to the office, go to our YouTube page and you can watch the video, which is going to be critical because we're actually illustrating on the whiteboard behind us. Or if you're driving, you're going to have to kind of visualize, eyes open, visualize what we're doing here today.
Yeah, I love your eyes were closed when you said eyes open. It's outstanding. Now, this is throwing my mojo off a little bit, like being in person, right? I'm used to like standing up behind my desk and moving around and like talking to you, so I'm going to bounce back and forth, but I think this is going to be great. So one of the things that we are all about, kind of our core tenets, our value inside of the Perfect RIA is reality, not theory, right? So I don't want lab coat information. I don't want theoretical information. Now, don't get me wrong. I like to pontificate from time to time. I like to have a beer, smoke a cigar, talk about some other stuff that goes on there. So I'm all about that in its proper place. But one of the things about being intentional, which is another one of our core values, right? Is being intentional is knowing where that time and place is from a theoretical environment to a reality environment. Here's a quick example. If we have a mastermind, we're smoking a cigar, we're out on the deck, we're doing this stuff, and we want to pontificate, I am all about, I support that.
Sure, of course.
Let's push our minds, right? When I jump into a conference room with a client, I am not pontificating, right? I'm not talking theory. I have taken my lab coat off. I have put on my practitioner hat, my financial advisor hat, my client-facing hat of how do I deliver massive value to those clients. And Jarvis, as you know, it's not just about what I know, it's about how I can communicate that.
100%. And a real struggle we have as advisors is, and let's use retirement income as a very specific example, whether they're retired or they're planning for retirement, there are the white papers and the research, which is really critical to know what are sustainable distribution rates, what are probabilities of success, what are the variation of returns. But those words will never go into a client meeting. If you walk into a client meeting and say your probability of success is X, you might as well have said that marshmallows are ridden on by unicorns on Tuesdays in Leprechaun Land. And this is not to be degrading to clients and prospects. It's to say that these people are not experts. They come to you for your expertise, not to have you recite back to them what Money Guide Pro printed out on page 47.
And let's just push back on this, right? Because we would do the exact same thing if we were meeting with an attorney with a client there, or an accountant with a client there, and the attorney starts going off on legalese, and they get all their legalese out. I want to hit the pause button, and I'm going to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Attorney, thanks for that information from legalese. My understanding in my layman terms, so please forgive me, is this. And I'm then going to explain it to the client. Then I look at the attorney, is that about right? Now, why am I doing that? Because the attorney's incompetent, my client's incompetent? No, they're speaking a different language, right? I mean, it's just not the same. And we can fall in that same trap.
Yeah, and it is the highest level skill as a financial advisor to be able to communicate complex topics in what we'll call layman's terms. Let's use your estate planning example. I don't want to go to the client and say, who would you like to serve as attorney in fact and contingent or alternative attorney in fact? They're going to say, I already have an attorney. Why do I need an attorney? Instead, what are we going to say, Mike? I'm going to say, hey, if you're not able to make decisions for yourself, let's say, heaven forbid, you got sick or you were in a car accident or heaven forbid, you got dementia.
We're in Alaska. The example is you get hit by a moose on the way home, right?
Yes,
that's our example.
But you're still alive and you can't make decisions for yourself. Who do you want to make those decisions for you? Now the client and prospect can say, oh, wait, I get that scenario. I want Betty, or I don't want Betty, whatever that is. But if I throw in some term they don't understand, attorney in fact, alternate attorney in fact, they're going to get lost by saying, wait, I don't know what's going on here and I'm not sure how to respond. Almost a fight or flight.
Yeah, amen, right? And the worst thing that can happen, in my opinion, please correct me if I'm wrong, but is the client thinks they know what you said, but it's totally the wrong definition of terms, right? And so now they think they know what an attorney of fact is, and now they're making a decision, but they have no idea what the real implications of that is. And that's one of the first things when we do estate planning, I know you do the same thing, but we start with definition of terms. Right? Now, we don't go through the legalese side of it. That's inside of there. But I make sure if a client says, well, you know what? I want X to be my trustee. Perfect. Let's talk about the role of a trustee. I want to define what those terms are right away.
Yeah, I guess the rule, Mike, and push back on this would be really avoid any terminology that you wouldn't hear a client use in everyday language. So if this isn't a term that you would use talking to your friend, right? You say, oh, geez, if I died, who's going to take care of my kids? Okay, that's a phrase they're going to use. They're not going to say, who's going to be appointed as guardian for my minor children? Those aren't phrases. So Micah, let's pivot this from estate planning to retirement planning, which is kind of the impetus of this podcast today.
All right, so we're going to get a little edgy on this, but you know what? That's the content that we like. So leave us 5 stars before we get too edgy for you. Okay, so one of the things that came across recently was an article, and this is the aspect where we get from our theoretical and we miss reality in there, right? So it started off some theoretical information about saying, okay, this is how we backdate stuff and Monte Carlo and yada yada. Okay, and those are different religious camps in my opinion, how you're going to do it, but those are fine discussions. Then this article dove down into talking about a script that they would give to the client. And then all of a sudden we're reading the script and be like, this is crap. I mean, it just really isn't there. One of the things that stuck out for me when I was reading it is it said, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, if in the short term you can get a 27% rate of return, this is how much it'll increase your income. I was like, holy crap, did you just tell a client in the short term they're going to get a 27% rate of return? Because that's what the client heard, right? Now, we have many issues with this statement right here.
Yes.
One, what's short term? That's tomorrow, right?
Yes, and no client can tell you what 27% of a number is. I know that you as our listeners, Micah, you and I can do this. We can, hey, 27% of $1 million, great, $270,000, no problem. But they can't do that. They don't think that way, right? So I'm not going to, and the article is great. It's written by an advisor we respect. So the technical analysis is accurate, and they were looking at the gap in the guardrails, but I would never say 27%. I would say, hey, if over enough time your portfolio grew by $200,000, then we could look at turning up your income. Because no one talks in everyday conversations about percentages, they talk in dollars.
But I want to stop you right there.
Please.
I want to pull out this nugget that's right there. Because what you just said was that if over time your portfolio grew by $200,000, then we could look at this, right? We didn't say short term. Now you might say this is a minute detail. It is not, or I'm totally wrong and you're welcome to push back, is we have to define timelines. The setting expectations with clients, like I'm going to get a task done to get your money sent out, right? Okay, perfect. This has to go to my operations team. It's going to take a couple days. I'm going to send out. Well, I just got the phone with the client. I said I was going to send the money out. They're expecting the money this afternoon in their bank account.
Yeah, if not sooner.
If not sooner, right? Why isn't it there now? Micah said he was going to do it. I completely failed to set expectations on how long. Versus, great, you need money out of your account. How about Wednesday of next week? That's the 17th. Is it going to be okay if the money shows up in your account by then? Mike, I really need this Friday. Great. I'm wonderful. You let me know. We're going to make sure that happens, right? I'm setting expectations.
By the way, Micah, something you didn't mention, just for sake of time, is you're watching the client's body language in the discussion. So if Micah says, hey, it's going to be next Wednesday, and the brows tighten a little bit, there's a little bit of concern, that's where I can remind them, you know what, this doesn't work like a bank account. You may recall how much interest your bank account earns. It's a round number. It's 0, and we laugh, right? Maybe it's 0.00. This account, because we want it to grow, takes a little bit longer to get money out of, 3 to 5 to 7 days, unless you give us a heads up, and we're going to go down that discussion. This is that small thing that separates the academics from the advisors that are delivering massive value. They know, wait a second, the expectations didn't align with reality. I need to do adjustments here.
So we can apply those things right there that we know of setting expectations in a client meeting on something small like a distribution. Yeah. We have to set the correct expectations on something larger like lifetime retirement income and what that's going to work and how that income is going to be there.
Yeah, and to go back to this 27% upside number or short term, excuse me, go back to this idea of in the short term, I would always say to clients, perhaps let's imagine a scenario where there's several years of really good growth, right? Several years of really good growth, not 27%, not short term. I want to always set that expectation so that I'm on the winning side. I'm also going to tell them, Mr. and Mrs. Client, Murphy's Law of Retirement is the day you retire, the markets go down and probably by a lot. And I hate to be the one to tell you, and I've got a big smile, that's probably what's going to happen. Great news, we're prepared for that. Here's where I win for this. If that does in fact happen, and again, Murphy's Law is that it will, they say, Matthew, you know what, just like you told us, the market went down when we retired. I don't know how you knew this. I'm so glad that we have our war chest in place. Perfect. So I've managed these expectations versus, Micah, to your point, hey, if the market goes up 27% in the short term, I've shot myself in the foot.
Yeah, I haven't done the math on this, but if you're running like a 60-40 portfolio, not saying that's what you should, when do you get a 27% in the short term, right?
Yeah.
You define the short term as 2
medium
years.
term, or
right? So I mean, there's some big expectations that we're setting with
if
clients.
you bought March of 2020, the bottom of the COVID panic, you probably...
Fair enough. So apparently it is possible.
It's possible.
All right, but setting those expectations is really, really important. So a couple of big things here, then let's jump on the whiteboard to an example, is we always have to be looking at this from a clear communication in the client's language about how they spend money. Do they speak in annual terms? Do they speak in monthly terms, right? They never speak in gross. We always speak in net to the client. This is the money that will be deposited in your bank account, right? If I'm getting a client who's getting ready to retire and they're used to getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, I'm not going to talk about the $117,000 a year in retirement income they have. That doesn't make any sense. I'm going to talk about the $6,000 a month they have deposited in their retirement account every month.
Boy, Mike, we could do a whole episode just on that. So I know that there's advisors that say, hey, bring me in your bank statements. I've never asked clients for their bank statements. And so I say, how much money gets deposited in your bank account each month or twice a month after they take out all that other stuff? And I'm using my fingers. After they take out all that stuff, the 401k, the taxes, what's the actual amount that goes into your bank account each month? And then they'll tell me, let's say it's $4,720 twice a month. Cool. All right, well, we want to make sure that in retirement you have about the same amount of income, even though, great news, you're not working. So again, I'm using all the same terminology that they use in their everyday life.
Absolutely. And then we'll make that distinction in there. It says, great, you're used to getting paid every 2 weeks in retirement. Most of your retirement checks, because again, we deal with federal employees, is going to come on a monthly basis. Your Social Security is going to come monthly. Great news with your IRA account. If you still want to get paid every 2 weeks, we can set that distribution to make sure that happens. I want to make sure this is the most convenient for you. What would you like? Either monthly distributions like most retirees have, or would you like to keep doing it every 2 weeks? Right? I'm going to give them an option.
Yep. And that's where we're delivering massive value. You might think, well, that's not massive value, one payment versus two payments. But for that client, it is. You're now the first advisor who understands their needs, who asks what's important to them. They don't care about the 93% probability of success because it means nothing to them. And hint, it means actually nothing to anybody. It's not even a real thing. It's just a lens for doing forward projections.
You know, and it's just so much of a tangent, right? We haven't even jumped into this other stuff, but sometimes clients will be like, well, Micah, shouldn't I take out a lump sum of money and just manage that out of my account? And says, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you've done a great job for the last 30, 40 years. You've aspired over $1 million in a nest egg. I'd hate to stop doing what works. Yeah. This is working on a great basis. You're getting paid every 2 weeks. Your pension and Social Security should come in on the first of the month based on this. How about we send your retirement check on the 15th? How does that work for your bank account? Then the wife or whoever runs the checkbook will tell me, well, really, all of our bills come at this time. Can we get the money here? Perfect. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's what I'm going for is when do they want the money? Now they got an extra 50 grand in their bank account for a zero number, right? But I want to make sure they have the income when they want it in their terms to make sure they feel comfortable with this retirement transition.
Here's a quick Matt and Micah tip, and then, Micah, I want to get to the whiteboard here. Matt and Micah tip, we always do our distributions between the 5th and the 25th of each month. Why? Well, because of holidays and weekends, I want to make sure, especially at year end, that a distribution, if we're planning for RMDs or anything else, doesn't get tripped up because the day falls on a weekend, on a holiday, and then it trips over into the next month or year. So I always ask clients, which day of the month between the 5th and the 25th works best for you for that distribution? Well, I would love it on the 17th. Perfect. We're going to set it on the 17th. Just remember that when the 17th falls on a weekend or a holiday, that might get bumped forward or backwards a couple of days. Is that enough flexibility for you, or should we move back a couple of days to the 15th so that we know that you'll always have it by the 17th? These seem like little things, they make all the difference.
It seems like so trivial, right? But really what this means to the client's end is that you care about their stress and their money cash flow. Money's emotional, right? We
Incredible.
tell all the time to the clients, it's so emotional, right? And we want to make sure, especially if they have the abundance to successfully move into retirement, we want to make sure they have that confidence going forward.
Perfect. So, and by the way, we're going to talk about this in great detail as it relates to prospecting later this week on our power session on Wednesday, May 18th, where we're going to go through how successful advisors double their prospect process by avoiding the 5 mistakes. But Micah, let's take the theory of retirement distributions, translate it. How, when a client comes in, let's say they have $1 million, because let's do easy math, and they say, Micah, how much can I take from my nest egg each month? How do you answer that question?
Perfect. Let's do it. All right, so let's jump into this retirement income. Now, I'm going to do this in 2 ways with a client. I'm going to talk about the prospect way that I'm going to draw it out. Then we can give examples, especially any of our Backstreet Pass and Invictus members can jump online and can see our 1-page status report or buckets report that we give out, the guardrails report on your end that we do to clients. Let's walk through it from the prospect aspect.
And then real quick, Micah, when you're meeting with a prospect in person, are you standing up and drawing it on a whiteboard like we're doing right now, or are you doing it on a piece of paper in front of them on the table?
I'm doing it on a piece of paper in front of them, upside down. So the piece of paper is them. Now, the upside down thing, this is not a must. If you need to face it to you to draw it and make it and then do it with them, that's totally fine. I love drawing this and not having it pre-done because it allows me to walk the client step by step, right? If a client's not used to this buckets concept and I give them this 1-pager, even ours, which I think is relatively simple, I don't exactly know where their eyes are looking. They're jumping ahead. They're not following along. When I draw it, their eyes are glued to where that pen is and what's moving on, and I can explain it step by step, and it just makes it such a great foundation. We do this for taxes, right? The buckets is such an amazing thing for taxes to show, great, what are the 4 different quadrants of income taxes, and how do we reduce your taxes over time? We do that. We do this. We do estate planning, how money transfers, right? So we love these illustrations that we draw with clients.
Like I'm jonesing right here because the other thing, or one of the many things it does drawing it out, is it makes it 100% personalized. And I think about if I go to the doctor with an acre pain or something, as I leave, they hand me a 5-page printout about that thing. And it always goes in the garbage because what did they do? They pushed a button on their computer, it spit out the generic Wikipedia page off of WebMD or whatever, and they give it to me. But if the doctor says, Jarvis, let's sit down for a second. The reason that your knee hurts is because you're not doing this certain exercise. And if you did this exercise, and let me practice it with you, your knee will stop hurting. Cool. That's 100 times more valuable to me than here's a printout on knee pain. So don't think that this drawing thing is because Micah loves to draw and he's secretly a child inside. He is, but that's not the reason.
It's a different issue.
Yes, this is critical. So every step matters.
I love it. Okay. So, and the other thing that you're going to see that, now I'm going to do this at a faster pace because I'm assuming you guys get how the math works. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker for time. It would definitely be slower, and I'd be definitely looking and reading body language to make sure I have agreements on both spouses as we're going through this. Other thing is that when, not if, because I'm writing upside down, I do a number backwards or I spell something wrong, right? I'll make a quick little joke. Sorry, I didn't go to art school, right? I went to school for math, so my math is pretty good. Art, I'm still working on. And the clients will laugh, right?
Yes, of course they do.
That's why I draw stick figures, right? And so there's simple little things that are there. Okay.
Quick note, Mike, as you're drawing this, listeners, if you're not a buckets user, which I'm not myself, if you're not a buckets user, listen and say, how am I going to apply whatever Micah's talking about to guardrails, to whatever thing you're using? How can I apply it? So don't let yourself get pigeonholed in your mind about this is only for buckets. It's for all communication. Micah, please.
I love it.
Let's see it.
All right. So, I feel like I'm being graded all of a sudden. All right. So, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, you guys have done a phenomenal job saving money for retirement. Now, first thing is, let's just take all of the money that you guys have saved for retirement, and just for simplicity, we're going to put it in this one big bucket. Let's not worry about taxes. Let's not worry about Roth accounts or anything else like this. Just for simplicity, let's say all of that money was together, and let's say all of that money was that $1 million or so that you have saved for retirement, which, by the way, congratulations on saving $1 million for retirement. This is going to go amazing. Now, what I want to talk about is how does this generate a retirement income that you're never going to outlive? How do you make sure you can do the things you always want to do in retirement? So we've already talked about, previously we've already talked about their pensions, we've already talked about their Social Security, so we've already laid the groundwork for these things. Now we're going to be talking about their investment income. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, one of the things that we want to do in retirement, I can't really make promises about investments, but I make 2 kind of promises about investments. Number 1, the day you put money in the stock market, tomorrow it will crash, right? So we know that's going to happen.
Yes.
And guess what? The second one is the day you retire, it'll be like 2008 and the market's going to crash, right? And they joke and says, all right, so we know those things are going to happen at some point in retirement. So how do we plan for those? 5 years is really, really important. We always want to be looking out over the next 5 years. This is why we talk about cash flow so much in our meetings, because in the back of my mind, I'm saying, great, what money are we going to need in the next 5 years? Any money you need to spend in the next 5 years does not belong in the stock market. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Client, why do we say that? Because 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. When the market fell, it took about 5 years to get back to even. You financial advisors that are saying, Mike, it wasn't exactly 5 years, you're missing the point, right? The concept of is what I'm going for here. It took 5 years to get back to even. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, had you had retired in that point in time, you're pulling out 4, 5, 6,000, whatever it is, a month in income, and every month that market is dropping and you're selling. What do you think that does to your retirement portfolio? It devastates it, right? This is what we want to avoid. We want to have sustainable retirement income. So great news, we have a strategy that's going to help with that. So the first thing we want to do is we need to have a bucket of money and we need to have cash. Now, inside of cash, what I want to see 1 to 2 years of distributions. Now, what does this distributions mean? This means the money you need to pull out of the account, right? However much money you need to pull out a month, I want 1 to 2 years inside of this bucket. And guess what? This bucket is going to earn a whopping point nothing, right? Just like cash in your bank account, this isn't going to earn any money, but that's not its job. Its job is to be here to provide you a monthly income to make sure you have it coming in your bank account.
Yep.
And so it's going to do its job really well. Then the second bucket we want to have is we want to have an income bucket. Now our income bucket, this could be bonds, this could be CDs, this is something else, but really this is going to be, so I want 5 years, so this is going to be somewhere between 3 to 5 years of money that's set aside inside of this income bucket. And so now between the cash bucket and income, we now have 5 years of money which is protected, which is outside of the stock market that's there. Because the stock market, it's going to be volatile. It's going to move up and down, which is great. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is how you got $1 million of investment savings, is by having a long-term approach and allowing that money to grow. And we need to keep that into retirement. And so we're going to call this our growth bucket. Inside of our growth bucket, you're going to buy, and the market's going to go up, and the market's going to go down, and it's going to be volatile, and it's going to be all over the place. That's inside of here. The biggest thing in this growth bucket is time. We gotta have this money have time to allow it to be invested, to allow it to grow, so that not if, when the stock market is down in value, we can keep taking money out of cash. And if cash starts running a little bit low, we can take money out of income, we can put it into cash, and we can keep sending you your monthly income that you're never gonna outlive. This is the importance of our retirement strategy. Does this make sense?
Yeah, there's so many pieces. We could do entire webinars on this. In fact, we have done entire webinars for our Backstage Pass and Invictus members. You can log in and see those. For everyone else in the nation, you can join us this Wednesday. But these kind of communication. Now, Mike, I'm curious, when you've had this drawing and then you've had other things and you ask the client or prospect, hey, any of these you'd like to take home versus me shredding them for you, which one do they always take?
The drawings.
They take the drawing every time. I've even had clients draw it, then bring their own version of the drawing back in that they drew. They say, hey, I was drawing this for my spouse. What did I miss? Oh, you got most of it's really good. Let's just add a couple little things.
I love it.
And you've also, Micah, pulled so many discussions off the table. We haven't talked about Morningstar ratings. We haven't talked about asset location optimization. There's so many things that we haven't tried to cloud their mind with. The decision we need them to make is, can I retire? Do I trust Micah to guide me through retirement? This gets us there faster than anything else.
Now, Jarvis, in here, how much money a month did I say that they could pull out of their portfolio?
I haven't heard a dollar amount yet.
I haven't heard a dollar amount, right?
Yeah.
This is intentional because I want to get, because if they don't believe in the concept of what we're talking about, if we don't have a 30,000 foot view agreement on this, then there's no point in talking about these dollar amounts. That's right here. So the first thing is we need to have a concept. If a client doesn't want to do this strategy, they don't want to have 5 years of protected income, they are not an ideal client for me, right? This is our model. So step one is we got to agree on the concept.
There's so much to unpack there as well, because had you given a dollar amount, now the dollar amount's up for discussion. Now if they're talking to another advisor or they read something online, now we're on this discussion. There's no assumed rate of return. There's no assumed interest rate. There's no assumed inflation, tax rate, because all of those become these little nuanced points. And especially when people are lost, they try to, like someone who's drowning, they try to grab onto whatever they can. So if they don't understand your concept and you say, well, the inflation assumption is 3.5%. Oh, wait, I get that. Hang on a second. I heard 9% is the number, and then we've lost the whole subject on that one thing.
Yep. And now it's a super easy discussion. When it comes time for the dollar amount, it's a super easy discussion. Let's say for simplicity that we need to pull $5,000 a month. Let's just say gross just to make math easy, right? $5,000 a month out. Okay, great. That's 60 grand. Okay, I want 2 years in here. Now we have $120,000 in that bucket, right? I want 3 years in here. So now we have $180,000 in that bucket. And boom, here's our 5 years of distributions that are right there. But they know the formula, right? They know what to expect. And the other part that I'm just geeking out, right?
Yes, yeah, please.
But one of the things that I love about this plants a seed in their
I was
mind
going to say that, yep.
for when they have future distribution needs. Hey, Mike, in about 4 years, we're thinking about buying this RV. We're thinking about moving. Do we need to change our cash flows? Oh, it's a great question, right? We'd love to pay cash for a new house at $800,000. You know, how does this money move over? Great, let's chat about that because it plants in their mind what they need to be thinking about. If I led with a dollar amount, that does not help them in planning. Now they say, great, this $5,000 a month, but I'm going to go ahead and pull 400 grand out of my growth account because I want to buy this RV. That affects the $5,000 a month in income coming in, right? So I got to show them the formula for this thought process, and it smooths out so many discussions and gives clients, boy, so much confidence in their own retirement as they understand this.
There's so many other things that have been eliminated here. If we go with Monte Carlo probability of success, well, 93, well, can I do 91, 98, 87, 86, 32? So it's taken away. By the way, not only is this effective for communicating with prospects, this is laying the foundation, Micah, for everything you're going to do with this client for the rest of their lives. This is not hyperbole here. This lays the foundation. I want to buy an RV. Cool. Let's look at how the guardrails or the buckets work. I want to go to cash because I'm worried the market's going to collapse. Well, we've got 5 years. Do you think that's up? No, I think we need 6 years. Cool. Let's bump this out just a little bit. We're not going to cash in the growth bucket until we have an issue here. So much is going on here that doesn't meet the eye.
You know, one of the other things that will often come up is how do we refill the buckets?
Yes.
Right? That's a constant conversation, which is great. And it says, well, the great news is when you talk about that concept of diversification, I'm sure you've heard, oh, yeah, I've heard diversification. Great. This is your diversification. We're going to do some other stuff as well, but we have money in these different pots, which is super important. And it's really easy. When, I never say if, when the market is down, we're just going to take money out of your income. We're going to take money out of your cash. We have 5 years for that market to recover. And great news is when the market does recover, then we can look at it and we can take some money out. But you know what? We're also not going to be greedy. If all of a sudden next year that market just takes off and goes up, we might say, hey, we do some good tax planning, we do some other things. We might want to take some profits off and start replenishing things. Great news is you have the flexibility and the protection for when that market goes down.
And Micah, we'll go into this more this week on the prospect process, but if I'm going through buckets or guardrails with a more do-it-yourself type of client and they say, oh, I think I could just do this my own. I say you probably could, but a couple of things. As you know, the IRS makes everything more complicated. And so while we illustrated one bucket, you actually have 5 different buckets. We're going to have to slice each bucket accordingly. We're going to have to take money from each one. So where I want things to be really simple strategically, as soon as people start getting this, oh, I could do this, then I pour the fuel on. Then I say, well, there's this, and 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 there's this. That's when I'm going to open up. What advisors make the mistake on is they open up the fire hose from day one, from moment one. Nope, I need to offer them a glass of water. And if they say, hey, I think I can get my own glass of water, well, out comes the fire hose. So we've got to have both things ready. Don't lead with a fire hose.
Don't lead with a fire hose. Make it. They made a decision to come and see you as a financial advisor because something was complex. And our job is not to dump our knowledge in them. Our job is to guide them on a path to meet their goals, right? Now, this didn't get into it. We've already had goals discussions, income discussions, et cetera, before that, right? This is only on this piece, but we could do whole things on this. But simplify it. Whatever you're doing, cut it in half, right? How do you simplify this conversation with a client?
I love it. Micah, let's pivot into some action items so that we can wrap this podcast up. I would say action item number 1. It is very, 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 very difficult. It took Micah and I years and decades of our careers to be able to translate technical knowledge into easy to explain things. So while you can go and read great articles in the journal and from all these industry experts, translating it into clients is very difficult to do. So the action item is find a system that you resonate, buckets, guardrails, whatever it is. Find advisors who are doing that and say, show me how you do that, and rip off and deploy, copy what it is they're doing. It's just going to take too long to figure out on your own how to take Monte Carlo analysis and translate it into client speak.
I love that. I'm also going to add to that,
if
I may. Let's add to that the client lens, right? So often when we're bouncing around as advisors and we start talking about things, and okay, great, I do a 5% distribution, blah, blah, blah. We know this stuff in the back of our mind, but that person's not in a client mode. And what I want to see is sit down with them in client mode. How would they present this information? What questions are they going to ask?
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on this, Micah. When you and I are reading technical articles on kitsis.com or wherever, I can immediately tell, without having looked at the bios, who's writing the article as soon as we get to scripts. I can tell you when an advisor either is not an advisor because they've never met with clients, or they have a very small practice because the scripts they're using, no prospect or not many will say yes to that. So it's immediately apparent to you and I. For different advisors, it's not apparent. So again, look and say, I only want to take script advice from people who are seeing clients. Technical knowledge, yeah, I want the nerds for the technical knowledge.
Absolutely.
But I need advisors to teach me how to be an advisor.
Second thing I'm going to do is whatever you're presenting in your client meetings, short and prospect meetings, short of them just being stellar, clients raving about them, etc., and actively wanting to take pieces with it, cut it in half. Cut your data in half. Now, when I go into a client meeting, just to be fair, I am prepared with a whole lot. Maybe that's just for my own head trash that I have to solve. I'm prepared for a whole lot. I only pull out what is directly valuable right then in that client situation to go through. But cut your deliverables in half.
Third and final action item, go to theperfectria.com and register for this week's Power Session, where we are going to talk about how to double the effectiveness of your prospect process, aka get twice as many clients, and how to avoid the 5 mistakes advisors make in prospect meetings. If you're a Backstage Pass member or an Invictus member already, you'll be automatically signed up. If you're not a Backstage Pass or Invictus member, what's wrong with you? But this is your chance as well. When we do these nation webinars, we open up for just once or twice a year to become a member and to get access to all of this great content.
Awesome. Until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.